Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Star Citizen Live. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee, and I'm back. About 2 minutes ago, don't boo me. Booing me in my own house. About 5 minutes ago, we realized that I haven't been on this set and sitting behind this desk since October 18th. It's been 2 months since we've been here. We've been on the road. We've been in the UK, preparing for CitizenCon, doing CitizenCon. We are back. I hope you enjoyed our wonderful, immensely talented substitute host last week, Will Weisbaum. I got jury duty. I got jury duty for the first time. I got the jury summons. And then they decided they didn't want me. That was depressing. Like, I'm not used to that kind of rejection.
It's harsh.
So, what's today's show about? It's about planetary art. If you did watch CitizenCon 2949, you saw one of our guests, this one right here, on two esteemed panels, the Terra Firma panel, which isn't live on YouTube yet, but will be shortly, and then of course the microtechnicalities panel, all about planetary art and our new Planetech V4 and what it does for Star Citizen, what it's doing for Star Citizen, what it will do for Star Citizen. So joining us to answer questions, follow-up questions about those two panels, is Michel Kooper. How you doing, Michel?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Jared.
And joining us as his first time, not just his first time on SCL, not just his first time on one of our live shows, but his first time on any Star Citizen related video whatsoever. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Sebastian Schroeder, and I'm a senior environment artist at the D studio, I guess. Yeah.
Did you forget where you work for just a second?
Well, I was like not sure what my
It happens.
Yeah,
It
we
happens.
changed company name, so.
Ask. I think it was Gareth Bourne who came on the show and he forgot his own name when we were doing the intro. He goes, "I'm," and it wasn't a gag. He literally spaced. It was pretty good. It's hard. Doing a live show is harder than people usually expect. So today's show, we are talking about, like I said, planetary art, the new Planetech that's coming into Star Citizen with the upcoming Alpha 3.8, what it does for our planets, for our moons going forward. As usual, you can submit your questions live in either the Twitch chat or the Spectrum chat by prefacing your question with the word "question" in capital letters surrounded by brackets. That's going to help us pull it out from the chat. We also collected questions, as we always do, early throughout the week on Spectrum, and that lets people vote them up. Now, before we get started, I do want to say that not all the questions that come in on those threads are always on topic, and sometimes not always the questions that are voted up are always on topic. For instance, I believe the most voted up question this week was about animals, fauna. In populating our planets and moons, which is a wonderful question, but not something the artists that work on the Planetech to build our environments can talk about. So we appreciate the enthusiasm, we appreciate the votes, but that's not something they can talk about. But we still got plenty of questions from the thread, so we have done our long intro. I was back. I'm getting used to it. Let's just jump right into it. The second most voted question that actually applies to you guys here. What sort of impact has V4 had on development time? Does it make making planets or moons faster or just better? Or both?
You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll give a very simplified answer, and then Sebastian can give it a bit technical stuffing to it. So we've essentially removed as much paperwork from the whole development process as possible. So what we had in the earlier version of our Planetech, and it's something that I had as one of the slides in the what's going on with the TV, had in one of the slides on the presentation, is basically this file structure that we had with all these separate files that kept the settings, and this was really slowing us down. So I think that was one of the most important things for making things faster. Mm-hmm. So by getting rid of that space, getting rid of that time, essentially we free up more time to work on the actual artistic part of it. So creating more content, more library items, more assets, more textures.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of summed it up, right? But
Go ahead.
but like in essence, it allows us to be. I'm not gonna put any numbers, but it's like it's gone from weeks to days for simple planets, just with how the process changed and how more artist focused it is now, and like yeah, it's just better all around, I'd say.
Yeah,
but I'm biased. So.
I would agree. Yeah.
Thinking about it, pardon me, I still have my cough from CitizenCon. Part of the challenge going forward when we do things like this, and that this applies to many things, not just Planetech V4, is we have now refined the tech that we use to build the planet that was used to build the planets that we've built, the moons that we've built. But as we go forward, we'll be building things that haven't been built before. Different planet types, different biome types, and stuff like that. So it's hard to completely estimate how much faster it will take us to build something that hasn't been built yet. It's always a challenge in all game development. But I can say from watching you guys convert the existing planets and moons from V3 to V4, and not just the quality increase, but the relatively short time span that's taking you guys to do that. It's exciting what Planetech V4 can potentially do for us going forward.
And to add to that, I mean, it's also we were doing it while building the tools and learning how to use them, so it's only gonna get faster.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think the tech is really solidifying, and I think already from going through this process, reworking everything, there's a lot of best practices that come out of that. That anything that comes after will benefit from.
Just like with our spaceships, we get better at making them the more we do of them.
Yep.
So, next question is, what is possible with Planetech V4 in terms of unique environment landmarks?
I mean, it depends what people consider to be unique environment landmarks, I guess. The fact that we are no longer tying a biome to a specific height map allows us to do a lot more diverse things. So we could, for example, have a giant desert and just put one single oasis somewhere in there, which was not a thing we could do before without sacrificing an entire set of height map data just for that. So that's always exciting, and you will see it from space if it's big enough. So yeah, I don't know.
I think when I think of in unique environment landmarks, I always go to Devil's Tower in Wyoming. If you've seen Close Encounters, the big giant crazy mountain formation that they had in Close Encounters, that's what I always think of when I think unique land masses. I don't know why. Probably didn't watch that movie too much.
To add to that, I think with the system, how the system works now, like Seb already mentioned, we're no longer repeating tiles that have a specific combination of this height shape, this terrain shape with these asset types and these colors. So all the elements are completely blended or mixed together in a unique situation everywhere. So depending on the temperature, depending on how this mountain range happens to be in that region where it's warm or hot, hot or cold, what types of assets and all that stuff. So every area is in its own way more unique. And if we talk about landmark things, 80%, the goal of the tool is to do 80% super procedural and not have to worry about it. And that frees up more time for us to do more specific crafted areas. We have outposts, which is more purposefully built. It's a point of interest for the players to go to. On the organic side, we would like to do similar aspects to that. I think caves is a good example of organic points of interest for players to go to. And I could imagine like having a massive rock or something big that is set up in the same way like we would do a cave or an outpost that has similar things that would draw a player to it, but it's not necessarily man-made.
Right.
So this is something that we'll continue to explore. I think caves is a good first step.
Okay. For our next question, this is probably the most common question we've had. While it wasn't the most upvoted, it was the most submitted in multiple places and got votes in multiple places, and it's all over the live chat right now. What can you tell us about water? People really want to know about water. We're talking waterfalls. We're talking rivers. We're talking oceans. What work has been done in Planetech V4 to support the addition of water to our planets, and what's still outstanding?
You go first.
Right. So water remains a difficult thing. We have a ocean that is on Stanton 1. But as players know, if you cannot go underneath the water surface, you cannot really interact with it that much. We have a frozen ocean, which you can actually walk over and all that stuff. So it's an ongoing process. One of the things that we cannot really do yet, but we are really looking forward to exploring and doing more work towards on the R&D side is all the water-related stuff, because one thing that I've always wanted to do personally is have like little small lakes or areas in areas that are not necessarily connected to the ocean. I think that would be really cool. Same with running rivers and yeah, when you get elevation changes, waterfalls that happen as well. But it's quite complex to tackle. So yeah, we don't have the answers yet for that.
Gotcha. Now, when you say it's complex to tackle, that's not the same as saying it's not going to happen. That's not the same as saying we're not going to do it or pursue it. It's just that you start with when you start any endeavor, you start with the things that are accomplishable now. That's what we do. It's what V0, V1, V2. You start with the things you start with the easier wins. You start with the immediate wins, and then you build from there. So
exactly. I think considering that we had to rethink how we do terrain, and because it's on a sphere, it's on a planet. There's a lot of groundwork that needed to be done before you can get all the other elements in there as well. But yeah, I don't think it's impossible. It just needs dedicated time to spend on it. And considering the changes we've been able to do in the last year and all the effort that went into that, and the people that we have working on this, I think that there's we will get to that point at some point.
All right. One of the questions from the thread had to do with, in a lot of the images that folks have seen so far, either at CitizenCon or the folks that are in Evocati, there seems to be there is occasionally an issue with repeated textures in some cases. Is this something that was it a V3 thing? Is it something that's been mitigated in V4? Is it something unrelated? Is it something that's still outstanding? What can you tell us about it?
The repeated textures are obviously an issue. They have been, at least from my personal opinion, better in V3. But that being said, V4 is still very much in a groundwork phase almost. I mean, it's pretty good already, but it's like the foundation of things to come. And the fact that the textures are tiling so much is like a compounded issue coming from technical issues about precision. Then we have to go into like the way we apply textures to the terrain. It's very manual right now, which we definitely want to improve in the future with more procedural things to help the artists do a quicker, better job at this. And then there's also the issue that we're still, like, I'm not sure if I should say this, but we've added tech to V4 the last 2 weeks. So it's still an ongoing thing. And we will there are definitely plans to improve this from a purely technical procedural approach as well, without any artist input. So it's not something we're gonna fix in 3.8, but it's definitely on the list of things to do, hopefully very shortly.
You make a good point there about how we're still adding to everything that makes up Planetech V4, even in the last couple weeks. Things are very rarely ever like done. Like, okay, that's it. That's the last we're going to do on something. and then we never go back to it. It's a hallmark of Star Citizen's development that if there's a fix to be made, if there's an improvement to be included, we will pursue that. The next question is actually related to this: is V4 considered final? Which I think I just answered, or will there be a V5, a V6, a V7 in the future?
Well, I wouldn't say it's final. I think there's a foundation now that we can continue to build on, and it's one that we put a lot of effort into thinking through and make sure that it is something that we could continue to build on. I don't think there are changes that would warrant a rename to V5, because I think everything that goes on top of this is an iteration on what in essence is what we have now, if that makes sense, like, from my point of view at least.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair, and I think a very valid point. We're just like, I'd say it's good in all aspects. I'd say some better than V3, some still a bit behind, but we have plans for everything to improve them. If we get when and how we're gonna get around to do that, we'll see. But nothing should warrant a complete rework or like a major number change, I guess.
We're never gonna say never. Let's put it that way. We don't want to sit here and say, oh, there's never going to be a Planetech V5. Take that to the bank. That's not what we're saying here. It's just that with V4, we believe we've got a foundation that's pretty solid that we can continue to build on, and we're hopeful that this gets us to where we need to go, and will continue to support us for all the time to follow.
Well put.
Yep. Speaking of the improvements over the last couple of weeks, it's been a while since Citizen Gun. I think are we 3 weeks away, 2 weeks away? I don't remember time
3?
right now. You guys have continued to improve. You guys have continued to iterate. I understand you have some Ian approved videos that you can show us, Michel.
Yeah, why not? So, yeah, like you mentioned, we recorded some footage just straight from the editor because obviously we're constantly polishing, and we want to get the best possible version out there to everybody soon. But in the meantime, during this process, we often just fly around the editor and just record some videos and share them amongst the team, just for everybody to check in on what the progress is. So you're
gonna do you're gonna do a screen share with us here now.
Yeah, I will. I just wanted to
gonna talk about it.
Yeah.
No, yeah, just gonna describe the experience.
Oh yeah.
No, I would just screen share. So we figured it might be nice just to bring some of these videos and share them with you, because I'm sure people would like to see it. All right. So this is just footage from the editor of the dark Arctic region on microTech. And so far, when we've shown this and talked about this, has only been static imagery, like a screenshot. I think there was about 3 screenshots in the microtechnicalities presentation. Mm-hmm. But it's sometimes hard to get fully comprehend what's going on and how the environment actually feels, unless you have some footage of just flying around and just seeing it in motion. And seeing the scale and moving through it.
I think one of the biggest surprises in the community, anyway, if I'm allowed to speak for the community here, with microTech, is that it's not just one giant snow-covered ball.
No, that's we were very keen on making sure that we, even though it's the theme is cold and ice, and that we have a diverse offering visually.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to keep asking you questions here. If you want to play it, you just want to just go through a couple of videos here. We don't want to lose the questions from the community here. What does Planetech V4 do to help with things like popping trees as distance changes and stuff like that? The load in, the LOD swaps.
I mean, Planetech V4 changes not really anything about that, to be perfectly honest. Mm-hmm. That being said, I mean, there are some improvements in terms of like what data the objects are spawned on. That's more stable and doesn't jump around as much if it lots out. That's one improvement. but it's also not necessarily connected to the lots. And then there's also the fact that we continuously work on the assets and try to improve them as best as we can. But it's also like disconnected from Tech V4 really. It's just the thing we try to improve our pipelines all the time. So it should be better than before, but it's not necessarily completely different.
From a layman's perspective, it certainly looks like it's smoother to me, and I don't know if that's just me imagining it, but I see more fades than just pops.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the whole data being more stable thing, really. Before, a lot of the moving of assets was not so much that the lots were badly made, but just that the data they are spawned on moved around with the MIPS. Like with when you zoom out, the quality of the data changes, and this is something that thankfully the engineers were able to improve a lot. So should be much better than before in this regard. But yeah, the underlying loading process is still the same.
Okay. So with another water question here, will things like oceans, rivers, lakes, ponds, and streams eventually carve and shape landscapes?
No, in the sense that we will not have the terrain dynamically change based on water flow or creating this playground where people could direct the water flow and make things happen on the terrain. I don't think it will be that dynamic, but it will more likely be the opposite, where we have terrain shapes that are very, especially with the simulated data that's behind it, will more likely create opportunities for water to appear or rivers to flow when we get to that point, when we get that part of it working.
Gotcha. Now we will go through as artists and stuff. We will go through and we will create rivers and anything that seem to have carved their way through rocks and stuff. But we're saying that it's not going to be something that procedurally happens live in the game. It's not. We're not talking about deformable terrain. The water will slowly like wear away the terrain or anything. But
exactly.
But we will. With our tools, we will go through and we will create the impression that these lakes and rivers and streams have been here for years and have worked their effect on rocks and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thoughts about volcanoes and lava? There were a lot of questions about lava planets. Like I don't know if people have just been watching episode 3 a lot lately. But a lot of stuff about lava planets.
I mean, I assume they're talking about cold and dead lava planets, which you can totally do, no problem at all. No, like in all seriousness, I guess they want to like liquid lava and stuff, but it's like the same issue as rivers, really. It's not something that the Planetary before can do right now. We'll hopefully get to that. And yeah. I mean, yeah.
I think volcanoes and lavas are really, really awesome. I would love to have them. But I think whatever we do next, whether it's more advanced water stuff or lava stuff, we want to make sure that it's a complete experience and not just a visual representation of what lava is doing on the planet. And then you walk up to it and then there's like you cannot interact with it or anything. So if we add it, we want to make sure that it's a meaningful addition beyond just a visual representation of something that looks cool. We want to make sure that gameplay is involved with it and that we deliver a complete package of like, oh, this is what it's like to have lava in the game and to interact with it.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons people are asking is probably because after CitizenCon we know that the Pyro system is beginning its development. So folks who have kept up with the Galactopedia, with the lore posts and stuff like that, looked at the star map for Pyro, know that I think there's a multi-planet or maybe even more than one. It's been a while since I've looked at the Galactic Guide for Pyro, but almost certainly there's some lava-related functionality with the Pyro system, and that's why it's on people's minds. I still think my Mustafar thing is probably correct, though. I liked episode 3.
I don't hate it.
You are the chosen one. No, I'm sorry. Let's see. What else do we got next? What is something you want to do that's not yet possible with Planetary V4?
Steep cliffs.
Steep cliffs.
Steep cliffs.
Overhangs. But this is this is more of an asset issue than we would realistically would be able to do with the terrain anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, all the smaller bodies of water, all the cool stuff you could do with that, like a lake in a mountain area or flowing water, waterfalls.
Okay. Now,
That being said, with the way, sorry,
no, sure, shot.
with the way that the Planetary V4 works with the whole climate data informing the visuals and every asset being able to know what kind of climate data it's sitting on will make it much easier for us to like build assets that nicely integrate with the terrain. So we can make essentially terrain extensions as meshes, and they will hopefully look the same as the terrain, or at least have everything the terrain has around it. And that is definitely something we want to work on very soon.
Now, Michel, you mentioned steep cliffs and stuff like that. I think our next question here might actually relate to that. Are mountains going to be taller than the cloud layers on planets? I know there's been some discussion in Spectrum lately with Ali, who's not here at the moment to talk about it. There's been some discussion about height map limits and stuff like that. What can you tell us?
So technically or theoretically, there's nothing holding us back from having the mountain peaks stick through the clouds. However, like at the moment, the clouds, as people know who do their landings, the clouds are not really that volumetric yet. It's something that's high on our to-do list and on our wish list that's being worked on. So we want to make sure that if we allow the player to travel through the clouds on a mountain peak, that we want that experience is what you would expect it to be. So you want to traverse through a thick layer of clouds and just be in the middle of it, just like you would if you fly with an airplane, for example. So that's one of the reasons why we felt like it's not quite the right moment for it yet, because right now it would not be that experience. Then just to hook onto that thread that Ali responded to, and just the general questions about steepness and terrain height. I think Ali did a really good job of explaining it and trying to explain why there's a limitation or what the issues are that we're running into. Actually, I have a little video prepared just to help me with that, because I've been reading that thread, so I sort of expected this would come.
Now, while you look that up, what we're referring to, guys, is there's a thread on Spectrum. Why is there a height map limit, if I remember it correctly? Our director of graphics, Ali Brown, has been in that thread for the last couple weeks, I think, answering questions there. It's a really good discussion about not just the limitations, but sometimes not just the technical limitations, but sometimes the creative limitations behind why we can do things and why we can't. So we've got a video here.
Yes. So I just recorded this little example of what actually happens with, maybe go to the other one first, with the terrain and how terrain is basically functioning. So we have a patch of mesh, like polygons, and we have our height map, and it's displaced. So it's stretching up and down, right? So this is based on just our height map of a piece of terrain that goes in, and it's pushed out. And what you'll see is sometimes with these triangles or polygons, they get stretched. So the steeper it is, the more they will get stretched. And some of the issues that we'll run into, and I prepared this one as a bit more stylized version of it. Like this is basically a grid with polygons doing the same thing, a very simple height map that will displace it. And these are basically our textures applied. And what you'll see will happen is if there's a smoothness. You'll see that these textures will remain quite nice and smooth, and they will not distort or displace too much. But what you'll see happening on the areas where, I'm not even sure if my mouse is visible. Is it?
Yep, we can see it.
Cool. What you'll see on the more steeper areas is that these textures will get really, really stretched. And it's a very old school problem to have. But it's one that is also quite hard to fix, especially if you're dealing with a whole planet's worth of height content that's doing all kinds of things. Some games, they fix this by covering up a lot of these surfaces with additional geometry. That's what we also do. But the steeper it is, and this is just the textures problem. But also, if you look at the triangles or the polygons, it's the same issue. We distribute our assets based on these points, these vertices. And if an area is super stretched, the more stretched it is, there's actually no points to attach these assets to. So they will find a spot to spawn on, and it will look very jarring. So if there's not enough geometry to support it, it will cause issues. So the steepness is a bit of a technical limitation, and that's the reason why it's hard to do and get results that are very visually satisfying as well, because we can do higher stuff, especially on the large scale. So I think Ali said it as well, like if you want a very, very high mountain, you would have to do a bit of a pyramid shape. So the top maximum height might be more than like 6, 7, 10 kilometers. Mm-hmm. But in order to get there, you would have to do it very gradually. And I think that's what happens in most situations on Earth and most large-scale mountain ranges as well. Like, yes, the maximum height is very high, but in order to get there, you're traveling kilometers and kilometers on the horizontal axis as well before you hit that highest point. And we sort of had to make a compromise, saying, well, in a patch of 4 by 4 kilometers, how much would you expect the maximum height difference to be? How steep would it be? And we sort of settled on maximum of 2 kilometers between the lowest and highest point. And if you combine that with the height map on the planet itself, which doesn't really have a limitation, we could go way higher. But then the steepness would be less. It would be less steep, but the maximum height and lowest point would be bigger than 1 or 2 kilometers. I hope that sort of makes it a bit clearer.
Yeah, and for folks who want to know more, Twitch chat is they're on the case. They're on the case trying to solve it. You can go to the thread in Spectrum. We see the discussion. Ali's been been really great about engaging in the conversation with everybody. You can see far more information from our director of graphics about what can be done, what can't be done, what we're still looking to do in the future about this. So check that out. Now we've got Hearst. This is the Planetary V4 version of Hearst.
Yes, this is from Monday. So
as in you did this work Monday?
So yeah, this is close to what will be going out soon. As you might notice, we took this opportunity to go a little bit back to the 2017 version of Hearst that we presented. So everything is a bit more darker and polluted. We wanted to take this opportunity just to go back to the original art direction a bit more. That's unfortunate.
Nobody saw that.
Nobody saw that. No. But yeah, all the elements are coming together again, and yeah, we're quite happy with the results so far. And like Seb mentioned, with V4, it's really about a new and solid foundation that we can continue to build on,
right?
Versus having what you have and try to like hook things into it to make exceptions for now we want to be able to do this. This is from the ground up, and I think that was the most important thing for us as the team, that we wanted to have something that we know in the foundation is correct, and we can actually continue to build on moving forward.
Now, will this run on my a 486, or do I have to upgrade to a Pentium?
It's not really
Just
more.
don't-
Okay,
don't-
sorry.
Sorry. One of the questions from the chat says, will we see traveled areas like dirt paths in the future?
In the future, we wanna get more stuff, road-related stuff, but yeah, we would need a tool for that. So that's had to take a bit of a backseat in favor of properly doing the Planetary.
So not out of consideration or anything, just nothing,
No.
just not in the immediate.
Yeah.
This looks like one of the junkyards. Seems more spread out than it used to be.
Yeah, this is one of the outposts on one of the little islands along the coast. So this is one of the new spots people will be able to visit.
Yeah. Did any of we see a lot of grass, a lot of rocks, stuff on the surface here. Did any changes in V4 affect the way that grass and plants can sometimes clip through the bottom of a ship or even our landing ramps?
Not yet. But this is something that we are continuously talking about how to improve, and we want to improve it because I think now that there's this foundation is set up, we can actually look at the details more. Mm-hmm. Which means that if you for example, the cacti, if you have your rover or your cyclone, beast of a machine, and you're just blasting through the wasteland, and then you run into those cacti and you're standing still, which it doesn't really match your expectations when you're driving around a vehicle in a vehicle like that, and you're hitting what I would expect to be a softer object, or at least I would expect it to break under when it gets hit. So stuff like that is stuff that we are still looking at. It's on the to-do list.
We got a couple of questions in chat about big cracks on the surface of a planet. I think they're asking if we'll see cracks that are big enough that we can actually go down inside them. But I think we hit the height map thing again with the.
Yeah, I think that that ties into the height map or the technical limitations of how the terrain works and is displaced. Any type of crack would have to have some sort of angle. I think Ali mentioned that it works best up to 70 degrees.
Right.
So if you want something super steep, that's actually it would come down to assets along those edges to sort of get more vertical faces, which is also something that we're looking into.
What are these? I know you're not actually moving through the thing, so I can't tell you to turn around. But what are these pillars we're looking at? Are these like oil derricks?
These are the prospecting towers in the mining pit.
Okay.
This is the video is recorded when the density of these assets, the occurrence of these assets is super high. So these are actually they're like there should be dotted around like 4 of them in this entire frame. But yeah. Like I said, this is taken straight from the editor as a,
just work in progress.
Yes,
it's all work in progress. If this were ISC, we'd have the work in progress tag in the lower corner. But this was a last minute ad for the show. We realized we had these this morning, so we decided to throw them in there as a treat for our viewers, so we don't have them WIP'd here.
May I come back to your question about having to get a better machine for this, though?
This is your show. You can do whatever the heck you want, Sebastian.
Oh, great. But in all seriousness, we made a lot of conscious effort to not spend much more resources for the whole thing. And in some parts we're even using less. So you hopefully won't need a new rig for any of that.
I just don't get to say Pentium very often anymore these days. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna say Pentium. I know we're still looking at Hearst in here. Has ArcCorp been improved in any way with V4?
ArcCorp is a very special beast in its own right, I'd say. Even in V3, we had to do a lot of put a lot of extra effort in at adjusting the tech just for ArcCorp, and we have done the same for V4 as well. That being said, since we had to redo all planets, we didn't go all out. Rebuilding ArcCorp with utilizing everything that V4 has to offer in terms of improvements. So we just tried to get as close or slightly better than V3 ArcCorp, which I think we hopefully did. But it's not. Yeah, I mean, it benefits from some of the improvements, like the space to ground transition being more consistent, but it's not a very different planet, I'd say.
Yeah, I think everything that improved in terms of the consistency from orbit to ground also is the case for ArcCorp. But a lot of the improvements that happened for V4 are very much based on the organic side of how a planet would work. So temperature and all this stuff, and what happens with terrain, and what happens with assets, and how stuff sort of mixes together. And ArcCorp is a very unnatural place because it's basically completely covered, right? So yeah, it's not benefiting as much from it as the organic locations.
For now, we'll see if we ever get when we hopefully get around to.
Yes, well, eventually, we were talking about this a little bit before the show. We've stated before in the past, eventually ArcCorp will need to be revisited to add things like its oceans and stuff like that. So I would imagine that whenever that time comes, will probably be a good chance to look at the other stuff.
Look at what it can actually benefit from in the V4 tech properly with a proper rework of content.
Yeah. There's a couple things on the bucket list. I think the big the butterfly seam at the equator.
That's still there.
Yeah, it's still there in 3.8 because, like you just said, it's ArcCorp. The work right now for 3.8 wasn't is minor as far as ArcCorp is concerned, but it's mostly for the other planets. But the addition of more biomes and stuff like that.
Speaking of ArcCorp.
Yeah. Good call. So that's the new orbital station.
Mm-hmm.
I have not visited ArcCorp in 3.8 yet. So. Now, one of the things this is a me question here. We are in these videos. We are traveling much faster than a player can ever travel. Look how fast we just got down from the station to the city. I know level LODs and stuff they're set based on the relative speeds that players can travel as far as when they stream in, when they stream out and stuff like that. We are exceeding that by quite a bit in these videos. Is that going to make the popping that we see sometimes in these videos a little more egregious than they would be in game?
I would definitely say any footage that comes straight out of an editor is like you mentioned, the speed is we're flying around at ridiculous speed. So the popping or the loading of these assets it's not meant to keep up with that speed. So it will be much less for players just playing the game and flying around. And
it just occurred to me as I was watching this. I'm like, because I know the tech art team and everything spends a lot of time balancing these LODs and their transition rates, and they're usually based on the speeds at which a player can move, and we are just here. And I'm like, they're not built to keep up with this speed, but they should look much better at relative player speeds. Let's see. ArcCorp's a beautiful planet, but with only 3 types of biomes, residential, commercial, industrial, the service can get a little repetitive. Will we see additional biomes eventually? Not with 3.8.
Eventually we will.
Yeah.
But yeah, for 3.8 it's just redoing what was there before and getting the whole set of planets out in time. So
Yeah. You see, we're moving so much faster than a player can.
Yeah.
So you can see the transitions more, but when you do this at player speeds,
it's going to be very, very slow.
much smoother. All right. Do you plan in the future to add mud on a planet with water? They're very water focused.
I can imagine. It's understandable. Water is a lot of fun to play around with.
I'm mostly water.
We do have mud textures. I think we're basically ran out of videos.
Sorry,
so
you can stop the screen share.
Cool. So yeah, we do have some mud textures already on some of the planets. I think you'll find some mud on Stanton 1 in and around the trash. But I think the question is more about, will we have slippery mud, and will we see
Deformation.
footsteps? I think it ties into what you would expect to see with a more complex simulation of snow on the ground as well. Like those effects of stepping into deeper stuff, and that's on the wish list that we'll still have to look at. So we have mud textures, but not slippery mud that will change your physics drastically, or create, like, you won't be able to create these massive mud slipstreams yet.
We don't have deformation, but I do think we can make the mud slippery for vehicles and stuff. I think that's possible.
Yeah, because I mean, it'd be good to make driving on the surface even more difficult than it already is.
Yeah, I mean the frozen ocean will also be slippery, so
yes,
I think the mud should be the same.
Now we have some basic friction, but it will not be visually very involved.
Let's follow up on that. While we're talking about vehicles driving around planetside, rocks. Why do you put so many rocks around?
Looks good.
Come on, help me out, man. But what's the deal? Well, why are there so many rocks?
That's a good question. I think in a lot of ways, the environments that we're building are not landscaped by humans. So I think first of all, we've tried to really improve our scattering methods in 3.8. So with the terrain being much more an element that feeds into the scattering system and where we distribute assets, that should already create a way more natural feeling of, okay, this is a dense area here. It's actually a clearing that you can sort of follow, and it feels like a natural path. But due to the procedural nature, you will still find areas that are super dense and less dense. Some areas the algorithm just gives you maximum rocks. So that can happen. I don't think that will ever really change. But we've really tried to balance that out wherever an artist is involved and is looking at an area.
But nature isn't always nicely traversable either. So
yeah. When you say things like, I don't think that'll ever really change. You know, we're talking about that there will always be difficult areas. There will always be places on when you're building an entire planet. There will always be places where it's difficult to traverse. It's meant to be challenging for you to get through there. But I really like what you said before about how we are constantly iterating on the algorithm, on the way that these things are placed, on the way on their densities and stuff like that. We've worked on 3.8, but that's not the only patch where we've improved it. We've actually improved it in previous patches as well, and it's something we'll continue to work on. It's I know many of our developers watch the YouTube videos, they watch the Twitch streams. That, you know, in addition to playing the game ourselves, we watch other people play and we see their experience, and we do want this to be a fun but challenging experience in a lot of ways. So we will continue to watch, we will continue to evaluate, and we will continue to adjust as we have been, based on the experience that we see players have.
Yeah. I personally, just to add to that, some of the sci-fi novels that you read is like one person plotting a. Yes. One of the things that I found was really, really cool about it is he had to plan out this route of kilometers just to get from point 1 to B, and like plan the whole trip. And there were so many dangers, like even basic rocks were very dangerous. Like, oh, this boulder field is going to be a real issue. I personally think it's really cool, but I also appreciate the desire to have a good smooth running rally through across a moon surface, or do like racing. So we're not doing it to make life difficult. I mean, we want to make sure that we can facilitate both, basically.
Yeah, it's in a lot of creation methods, sculpting, for instance, it's easier to take away as you go than it is to build up after the fact. You know, you start with a big slab of granite. You start with everything, and then you slowly start pulling away the parts that you don't need to get to the shape that you want. And I think that's where we're at. We're still working with our big slab of granite right here. We're still refining the way the granite is made, and then as things continue, we'll continue to sculpt things off of it and make it a more enjoyable experience. Seasons. This has come up a couple times in the chat. Will we ever see planets change depending on seasons?
Hopefully. I mean, the fact that we have everything based on temperature and humidity now, which is like almost climate, will allow us to do much more than we could before. But it's still something we need to put more work in and like build things specifically for it. So hopefully we will be able to have seasons soon, or like eventually. Who knows? But yeah, it would be nice to have it, and we're already preparing some of the assets in a way so we can actually change their color, like have the leaves turn, change their color and stuff. So we are slowly preparing for it, but I'm not sure if there are like specific plans to get that, like when that is gonna be a thing, or if. Yeah.
Right. It's a very large scale dynamic thing that would need to happen. So yeah, we can sort of predict or like imagine how we would set up assets for it, but how all those components would tie in together.
The point is, it's not coming next week, if it comes at all. No, one of the really cool things about Planetech V4, and we talk about it quite a bit in ISC that went out yesterday with the VFX team, is what you just mentioned, Sebastian. How we now have temperature information in the not the tile sets, the surface types and stuff like that, and we can pull so much from that. Like that's what the VFX team is tying into that to inform the type of ground storm that is produced over each area. So it's definitely conceivable, at the very least. It seems like it's theoretically possible to tie into that same information to kind of to flock trees in the winter or something like that. But at this point, I'm not aware of any direct plans or intentions to do that at this point. But who knows what the future holds?
Did Ali talk about the snow depositing on the suit of the player? And that was a thing in Sitcom, right? So
yes.
That's also like that's gonna tie into the whole environment as well. So we will be able to have snow deposit on everything in the environment eventually. So there are things coming together that will hopefully give us seasons eventually. But yeah, we're not done there yet.
Yeah, so a lot of building blocks being put into place.
Now the snow buildup, if I remember correctly, that on the affecting the player outfits, that's not in 3.8. That's coming later because
3.9, I think.
Yeah, because we have to go back and reset up all the different armor types and character types to do that and stuff like that. So so the tech is there. We just need to implement it across everything at this point. Yeah. Will there be caves to discover on microTech and its moons in 3.8?
Not for 3.8. And this has to do with if we think about caves on microTech and its moons, I think we would really like to see a new archetype, which would be frozen caves, ice caves.
Right.
So we really want to do it justice and do it properly. And if we would put in caves now, it would probably be the archetype that we already have, because just simply due to time limitations. But when we do caves on microTech, we want to make sure that they are proper ice caves and they fulfill that ice cave feel, and look as cool as they can be. So not for 3.8, but in the near future.
Okay. We have a question here. Let's go a little further ahead. We know that microTech comes out with Alpha 3.8, but a lot of our backers are always about, all right, but what's next? Crusader. We know that Crusader from lore and everything is a gas giant. Does Planetech V4 apply to Crusader? Because we talked about earlier how it doesn't apply to Arc because it's mostly an organics kind of thing, but that seems like maybe Crusader might be an exception as well.
Yeah, Crusader is like even more detached from Planetech V4 than Arcorp, because Arcorp is at least a solid thing, but Crusader needs its very own tech. And I mean, maybe we will be able to use some of its tech and repurpose it for Crusader. I don't know about that. That's probably for Ali to answer, I guess. But yeah, it's not gonna have any impact on Crusader.
Yeah, there might be some logic or just general methodology that we can sort of take into whatever we do for Crusader. But Crusader will be its own piece of tech to do that, and that would involve all the clouds and just having those look and feel correct. And like Seb said, it doesn't. It's not even a physical or solid thing that you would fly to. It's basically all types of clouds and layers, and yeah, it's a very different system.
Yep, and folks can expect to hear more about Crusader as we continue its development next year in things like ISC and maybe even back here on SCL. So stay tuned for that stuff. Guys, this is it. We're at the end. I got one more question for you, and then you get to go for the weekend. You get to watch all The Expanse, which just dropped on Amazon. That's not a commercial. That's just me saying I'm really excited to watch
excited
The
for that.
All right. It's not a commercial. I just like The Expanse. What's the thing about Planetech V4 that excites you the most? You guys have been working on this between Planetech V2, Planetech V3, Planetech V4. You've been working on developing this tech for some time now. Where we're at now, what it does for us in the future, what's the thing about it that excites you the most?
For me personally, it's definitely the things we can do with it in the future, just because it's so enabling in all different kinds that we always wanted improvements to have, but we're kind of limited with the groundwork that we had. And now it's like I said before, we have plans for essentially every part of it it can be improved. And that's what excites me the most, just so we can get better looking planets much faster in the future. And and a lot of things we couldn't do before. So that's what excites me the most.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much my answer as well. It's such a thinking back of earlier Planetech, like a lot of the stuff that we wanted to do either had to be an exception to the rule set that we have, or the more complex stuff got, the more we found ourselves adding exceptions in order to do stuff, and then in the end you'll have this very complex system of all these rules and exceptions and checkboxes that you need to make sure that you need to enable for it to work, and then you forget one, and now we're at this at a new system which fundamentally has a very grounded logic to it, and allows us to you can imagine doing stuff, and you can imagine like, okay, well, this requires temperature, or I understand that I can plug this into the flow maps and the humidity in order to achieve a certain thing. And so with that data, you can actually everything you could almost imagine. Well, I wouldn't say everything, but a lot of the stuff that we would want to do, you can sort of plug into the logic that is there now. And with that foundation, that we can actually look forward to, okay, now we can start building again on top of it, instead of adding exceptions and little additional checkboxes just to enable certain things.
Well, that sounds great, guys. Thank you so much for taking your time to be here on Star Citizen Live. Sebastian, it was your first time doing video for us. How was it?
Thank you for having me. No,
Great.
it was surprisingly good. I mean, I think I didn't make a complete fool out of myself, so that's always good. I actually had fun.
That
good.
mic really picked up that breath. It's so far from your mouth too, and it was just like you're so this. It was surprisingly good. I had a lot of fun. All right, that's Sebastian. That's Michel. I'm Jared.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for watching us, everybody.
Thanks for watching.
There'll be no SCL next week, but we'll be back with our last ISC of the year. So this is the last SCL of the year. So enjoy. We'll see you on ISC next week. Happy holidays if we don't see you then.
Happy holidays, everybody.
And until next time, take care.
Till then.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. For the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42, you can subscribe to our channel, or you can check out some of the other shows, and you can also head to our website at www.robertsspaceindustries.com. Thank you very much for watching.